Hey guys, it has been a hot minute since I have been here on YouTube, and to be fair, my April was pretty horrific. It started with my car getting stolen and trashed and totaled by a drug addict, and I did make a video about that. That was a whole thing that took up a lot of my time in April. What I didn't mention in that video was that running parallel to that, my dog, my darling, amazing 5-year-old German Shepherd, Dougal, getting diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma. And in fact, the diagnosis came, I think, 2 days after my vehicle was stolen. So these two things were sort of running tandem throughout the whole of April, pretty much. And Dougal actually passed away just about 2 weeks ago. So it's been a very, very difficult month, I'm not going to lie. But I thought that it would be good to jump on here and just make a kind of quick video about this. Really, more than anything, to maybe just try and help anyone else that is currently going through this sort of situation with their pet, because it's hard and it can feel very lonely going through it. And if I can just help anyone else get through this, that would be good. So where to start? Well, I guess I should start at the beginning. My ex-partner and I, who are still very, very good friends, and we're very, very close to this day, but we adopted Dougal together 5 years ago when he was an 8-week-old puppy. He was our absolute baby. We are both childless, and he, you know, I would hesitate to say he was our child, but he was definitely a very, 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 very well-loved member of the family. And we brought him up together until he was 4. And when he was 4, my ex and I split up, and I actually moved out of town for a year, and Dougal continued living with my ex for that year. More than anything, just because, I don't know about where you guys live, but where I live, it's virtually impossible to find a rental situation that will allow a German Shepherd. And so we had found this situation where we had kind of snuck him in. I mean, that's another story, but basically we had found this rental situation that kind of tolerated him, I guess I would say, or just kind of pretended that he wasn't a German Shepherd, let's put it that way. And, you know, he was settled here in Portland, and etc, etc. So moved away for a year, continued to visit him really, really frequently, and then I moved back to Portland this past summer, and have been living a block away from my ex and from Dougal, and I was seeing Dougal pretty much every day. My ex and I are very good friends. We hang out all the time, and we would hang out with our dog and go for walks with our dog and everything. So around about the end of March of this year, so that would have been, gosh, about 6 weeks ago, my ex just started noticing that Dougal was panting a little bit more than usual. Now, he's a German Shepherd, he's 92 pounds, and he does kind of pant a lot, but it was a little bit excessive, and he kept asking me, do you think that he's panting more than usual? And I would look at him and say, I do think he's panting more than usual, but it's hard to say if that's cause for alarm. What we were both thinking at the time is that we'd had really cold weather up until the end of March, and then right at the end of March, it started to get a little bit warmer, and we were thinking, well, maybe he's just panting because it's warm. I mean, we had a very, very warm kind of end of March, and April's been extremely mild. So I think initially we were both sort of thinking that. And I took him on a hike at the end of March, one of many hikes, and I noticed that he was panting just a little bit more on the hike than usual. Like, nothing crazy, but just enough to kind of set alarm bells ringing. After that, the panting just got progressively worse, to the point where we did take him to the vet. So yeah, we noticed this increased panting, and my ex, who had worked as a vet tech many years prior, had also noticed that he just seemed a bit kind of distended, And initially, I think his concern was that Dougal might have had something called bloat, which is something I'd never heard of before, but apparently it is, well, it can be quite common in dogs and it is often fatal. So once that got into his mind, we booked a vet visit very quickly. One of the frustrating things if you don't own a pet about vet visits is it's very, very hard to get a vet visit immediately. And so I think we weren't able to get a vet visit booked for a couple of days. It might have even been a week. I don't remember, but I remember that we had to wait certainly a couple days to get this vet visit. And in that duration, just even in those couple of days, Dougal started to deteriorate pretty badly. He is usually a very, very rambunctious dog, very, very smart, very, very active. He goes swimming almost every day. He goes hiking. He will run and chase the ball for like an hour straight in the car park next to our apartment. Just, you know, very, very active, and he just really started to go downhill. My ex had one particular night where he called me in the middle of the night and was like, I'm really, really worried. He just seems like he might not make it through the night. And this was super alarming, because for that to happen that quickly was just, you know, what is going on? So we got him into the vet, and they, if I remember correctly, they did x-rays, ultrasounds, they did blood work, and then we had to wait for all of that to come back. That all came back pretty quickly, and the diagnosis was that he has lymphoma. So at that point, the vet immediately put him on a course of prednisone, which is a steroid. Now, I don't know a whole lot about this field, so I didn't really know what that was or what it did, but essentially what it does is it can actually tamp down and kill the cancer cells and put the cancer into remission, which is great. So Dougal was started on a course of steroids that day, and almost immediately upon starting the steroids, it was like complete personality transplant. He was completely back to the dog he had been. If you hadn't told me that he'd had a cancer diagnosis, I would have laughed in your face. You know, he was back to running, back to hiking, back to swimming. I mean, he completely bounced back on the steroids. The only thing was that he was still panting, and ironically, steroids actually can cause dogs to pant a lot. It's one of the side effects of being on steroids. So the panting got worse, but the cancer itself was pretty quickly kind of smooshed, I guess you might say. So that was great. The problem with that is that one, the panting was, very excessive, and it was clearly making him very uncomfortable. He didn't like being in the house a whole lot. He really liked to go out onto the balcony a lot because it was cool. And then the other thing was that the steroids were only a very short-term solution. So what our vet told us, and this is apparently very typical for dogs, is that the cancer builds up a resistance to the steroids quite quickly. So steroids for dogs will typically work at putting cancer into remission for between 1 and 2 months. And then after that, your dog is going to build up a resistance, and they're going to go downhill very, very quickly, and death will occur pretty shortly afterwards. So, we wanted to give our dog more of a chance than that if we could. So our vet then referred us to a veterinary oncologist in a suburb nearby, and we were able to get an appointment with her. He went to the vet, they did more blood work, they did a biopsy, just all kinds of stuff. And they were able to kind of hone in a little bit more on sort of like the type of cancer and how aggressive it was. And they decided to put our dog on something called the CHOP protocol, which is a very expensive, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I think the whole protocol was gonna be about $7,000. Chemotherapy is not cheap. I'm just gonna go ahead and put that out there. But we, decided that was what we were gonna do. We wanted to give our dog the best possible chance, and he was started on the CHOP protocol. So, started started on the CHOP protocol. It's 3 different drugs, I believe. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce any of them, but some are administered through an IV, others are administered orally. It's a sort of a mix and match kind of protocol from week to week, and I believe it was going to be 16 weeks long, I want to say. And then at that point, hopefully the cancer would have been in remission, and that would have given him about another year. That was their estimation. So that's what we did. And he switched to the CHOP protocol, and it became pretty immediately apparent that it wasn't really working for him, which is unusual. All the research that we had done really indicated that most dogs respond very well to it, but for some reason Dougal just was not responding well, and in fact he seemed to be going downhill, you know, when he was taken off the prednisone and put onto the CHOP. So, you know, he had 3 visits with the oncologist on this CHOP protocol, and then on the 3rd visit she switched him to a different protocol based on the fact that his lymph nodes were still getting larger, they weren't going down, you know, we just weren't seeing the kind of progress that you would and should expect to see on this particular therapy. So he was switched to this different protocol. You know, she's the expert, she's the oncologist, you know, she knows what she's doing, and so she switched him to this other one. But things just continued to go downhill, and I think, you know, honestly, the reality was that he just had a very aggressive form of cancer, and the vet said as much. I mean, one of the things we brought up to her was that this just seemed to come out of nowhere. You know, it didn't seem like he had a whole bunch of signs and symptoms. It wasn't like this kind of slow decline. It was like one day he was great, and the next day he was panting, and then 3 days later it was like he was dying, you know. And she was like, yeah, you know, this particular cancer that you have, it is very aggressive. It's not like it was lurking around forever. It just comes on and it's just extremely aggressive. Yeah, we switched to this other protocol, and that really, unfortunately, didn't seem to work either for him. And I don't know, it's interesting. I mean, he was switched to this other protocol for the last week of his life. And he would have days where he was amazing. You know, we have videos of him 2 days before he died going absolutely crazy, running around in the car park, chasing the ball for an hour, going swimming in the river a block from where we live. I mean, just, you know, absolutely going bonkers, you know, just absolutely loving life. But then there were other days during that week where he would just have a really hard time. He'd be panting. He would have a lot of leg pain, and he would yelp sometimes. You know, there would be nights where he would just have like the roughest night, and you would think, oh my gosh, like tonight is going to be the night we're going to have to call out the vet for him to be euthanized. And then the next day he would just sort of bounce back, and so it was this very sort of like, you know, up and down and up and down and up and down, and you never knew what to expect. And, you know, is this going to be the day when he like dies? Is this going to be the day that we have to put him down? And then it was just, I think what was so hard about the last week is that it wasn't this very sort of like slow decline. It was just one day he's great, the next day he's dying. One day he's great, the next day he's dying. This morning he's great, this afternoon he's terrible. This afternoon he's great, this morning he's terrible. I mean, it was just so unpredictable to gauge his behavior, and it really made us pretty sick with worry, because neither of us knew when we went to bed whether he was going to be alive in the morning. And that sounds melodramatic, but really it really was the truth. 2 days before he passed away, my ex texted me and was like, he's really not doing well. And I came on over and I opened the front door to the living room. I came up the steps and I opened the front door to the living room, and usually if Dougal heard me on the steps, he would come running to the door. He'd be right at the door. I'd open the door and he'd be leaping up on top of me. I mean, just leaping up on top of me, you know, like mauling me with, like, you know, affection. And I opened the door and he wasn't doing that. And I looked down and he was on his dog bed, just lying on his dog bed. wagging his tail like crazy, but he didn't get up. And my ex turned to me and said, he can't walk. So we called the vet, and the vet had a think, and her conclusion was that either he had been lying down for a long time and kind of cut off his circulation because he was sick, and he just, had kind of pins and needles essentially and couldn't walk, or the other prognosis that she thought was a very real possibility was that his lymph nodes is actually swollen so much that they were pressing either on the nerve endings or the blood vessels and actually preventing, in one way or another, him from being able to stand. So, once your dog can't stand, it's pretty alarming. So we were just kind of thinking, what are we going to do? Like, he can't stand. We tried to kind of encourage him to stand, and eventually we got him to stand up. And I was like, okay, we have to get him out to pee. He's got to go. He's not going to go inside the apartment. He's going to try to hold it. He's a very smart dog. So we got his lead on, and as soon as he was able to stand, and he standed up, he was really wobbly. We kind of got him down into the courtyard, and he kind of zombie walked down the steps and got into the courtyard and peed, and then he came back up. And then it was like, once he was up, he kind of improved. And this kind of harkens back to what I was just saying, like he would have these really bad days and he would have these really good days, and it was just very sort of swings and roundabouts. So, once he was up and he was standing, he kind of was able to continue to stand, and he even started running around the living room and chasing the ball, and we were just like, okay, you've gone from complete invalid to kind of like running around, okay. So we decided to take him for a short walk. We thought, let's take advantage of the fact that he's up, let's get some blood flowing, and we took him for a very short walk, just a couple blocks away. We went down to the river, which is his favorite place in the universe, and he scrambled down the bank and put his paws in the water and was just very excited. We took him on this little waterfront loop, and we went around this apartment complex that has this kind of moat. That's the only way to describe it. It's like a moat that goes around three sides of it, and there's ducks, and there's actually a beaver hanging out there, and there's ducks and everything, and he enjoyed seeing that. He was kind of limping, and he was definitely lagging, which is not like him. You could tell that he was nowhere near 100%, but he got out on a short walk, and that was the last walk of his life. And he got back that evening, and he was just full of energy, and my ex, texted me and was like, even at 11 p.m. he was like ready to play. He wanted his tennis balls out, and he was just, full of life and, wanting to just be a dog. So that night he went out to sleep on the balcony like he had done every night. So my ex's apartment has a like a metal balcony. It's like a grated metal balcony, and I think Dougal really liked lying on that because it was very cool. And with all of the panting from the treatments, he just really liked to be out in the open air and lying down in the cool. In April, it wasn't cold, but it was just perfect temperature for him at night. So he did what he had been doing for the past couple of weeks, and he went out onto the balcony and he laid down and he went to sleep. Well, at 5 in the morning, my ex woke up the next day, and he woke up before his alarm, and he apparently was lying in bed, and then his alarm went off. And as soon as his alarm went off, he heard Dougal yelping from the balcony. So Dougal had obviously heard his alarm, realized he was awake, and decided to start yelping. So my ex runs out onto the balcony, and Dougal is lying on the balcony with apparently just a look of absolute kind of terror on his face, like just fear. And he, I guess, had been trying to stand up, and he had realized that he couldn't stand up at all. And he just, I guess, was kind of panicking, So my ex texted me at 5 in the morning. I didn't get the text until about 6:30. I was sleeping. And as soon as I got it, I came on over, and I, walked into the house, the apartment, and it was very quiet. And again, normally when I would walk into the apartment, Dougal would be running up to me and jumping on me and leaping around and wanting me to play, and it was just very quiet. And I didn't see him anywhere downstairs, so it's a 2-story apartment, so I went upstairs, didn't see him anywhere upstairs, and then figured he must be out on the balcony. And I went out onto the balcony, and he was just lying down on the balcony, and my ex was out there with it was like 6:30 in the morning, with like a coat and a hat on, just sitting with him, petting him. And he's like, I don't know what to do, like, Dougal cannot get up, like, he just cannot get up. And I looked at Dougal, and I just, if you've ever known somebody or something that has been sick, and I work in healthcare, I've worked with plenty of people who were on hospice, who passed away. You reach this point where you just know that it's not going to be long. And it's so hard to quantify that, but when you reach that point, you know. And I looked at Dougal and I just knew. I was like, I think today's going to be the day. And my ex was like, yeah, I think today's going to be the day. And we had been, I think my ex especially had been wondering, how do you know when it's going to be the day? Like, how are you ever going to know? And I think I looked at him and I said, will you know? And he said, yeah, I know. So we had this dog that was dying out on our balcony. He was yelping in pain anytime you basically touched him, and he couldn't stand up. It looked like he had gotten up once during the night to go pee, because there was pee in the corner of the balcony, so I'm really happy that he was able to stand to kind of go do his business, and then he had obviously come back and laid down again. My first thought, and I don't know what this says about me, but my first thought is, if our dog is going to die today, I want him to have some dignity. And the thing about my ex's balcony is that it faces another side of our apartment complex, and it's a 5-story apartment complex, and I don't think there's actually 100 windows that look, well, there might be, I don't know, there actually might be. It feels like there's hundreds of windows looking straight out at the balcony. I mean, that's the way it feels. You've got this courtyard, and then there's just, just a whole sea of windows of the other apartment complex looking down. And I just turned to my ex and I said, if today's the day that we have to put our dog down, I don't want 200 people watching. I said, we've got to get him off of this balcony. And my ex was like, yeah, I agree. So we went to the first thing we tried to do was try and stand him up, and we couldn't even touch him without him yelping. I mean, he was obviously in a lot of pain, and that was new. He'd had the panting, he'd had days where he was kind of sensitive and he would yelp, but this was like just pain like I hadn't seen him in before. So we were trying to figure out, how do we get a 92-pound German Shepherd who was just like dead weight from the balcony into the apartment. And I, again, having worked in healthcare, I was like, well, let's get a blanket under him to start with. So we kind of very gingerly lifted his limbs, and he was obviously in some pain, but we managed to get this blanket underneath him. And I was like, okay, you take 2 corners, I take 2 corners, let's just try and lift him and move him into the apartment. Well, as soon as we tried to lift, he just started yelping like crazy. And it just broke my heart. I mean, he was obviously in so much pain. And I was like, okay, that's not gonna work, We had a plywood board that was sitting on the balcony from a project my ex had been working on, and I said, let's try and get that underneath him. And that's kind of what we ended up doing. We had this kind of plywood board, and we got it half underneath him. We each took one end of the blanket and basically, and this sounds crude, but we basically dragged him into the apartment. Like, I mean, gently, very gently, but he couldn't walk. We had to drag him in. It wasn't even 7 a.m. at this point, and so we couldn't call anyone. The vet wasn't open, the oncologist wasn't open, and the compassionate care, euthanasia business wasn't yet open. So we just sat with him. We kind of got him into the apartment, and it was on the 2nd floor, and there wasn't really anywhere for him. I would have loved for him to have been on the 1st floor. There's a big open living room, plenty of space, lots of light, but we couldn't get him down the flight of stairs. He wasn't able to stand. And so the only kind of real space on the 2nd floor was the big landing area before the stairs. And so we kind of dragged him carefully to the landing, with the blanket and got him comfortable. And I kind of turned to my ex and I was like, you know, this is probably where he's gonna pass away. And my ex was like, yeah. So 8 a.m. rolled around and we called the pet euthanasia place, and they were very lovely on the phone, and they said that they could get someone out, but it wouldn't be until between 5 and 7 p.m. And we said, okay. So that was that. We now had a date for our dog to die, and it was going to be between 10 and 12 hours time. And it was a very hard day. You know, Dougal was not doing well. He was obviously in a lot of pain. He was panting. He had pain meds along with his cancer treatment, so we gave him his pain meds, and that seemed to help. But the pain meds only lasted for a couple hours, and they would wear off, and then we would have to give him more. And when they started to wear off, it was tricky. We actually gave him pain meds a little more frequently than he was supposed to have them, and the rationale behind that was really, well, you know, by the end of the day, he's gonna be dead. You know, any worries about, oh, it's going to affect his liver or his heart, at this point were completely moot. You know, the only thing that I was concerned about at this point was just keeping him as comfortable as possible. So we're like, we're not going to ration these pain meds. Like, if we feel like he is in pain and he needs another pain med, we will give him another pain med, and that's what we did. He just lay there and kind of panted and was just very out of it. He would have these moments of lucidity, but a lot of the time he was just, you know, you could tell he was in a lot of, you know, I don't want to say pain, but he was having a lot of discomfort. You know, his breathing was obviously very labored. And just, yeah, it was just hard. My ex and I stayed with him all day. We just literally laid there with him on the floor. I laid next to him and my ex laid next to him, and we just petted him all day. And, you know, I think one of the hardest things about that last day, honestly, was neither of us wanted to leave him alone, because we knew that this was the last day we were going to have with him. But that was sort of tempered by the fact that I felt it would be better for him to sleep, you know, and I think when I look back, well, even at the time, honestly, when I was thinking about it, you know, my ex and I being there petting him and everything, I mean, it was very comforting for him, but I also think in hindsight, maybe it was a little distracting for him. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's like, who can say? There were definitely times when my ex and I were talking, and I would turn to my ex and I would say, let's just not talk. You know, I just want Dougal to kind of sleep for a little bit. You know, I think that he's going to be the most comfortable when it's quiet and he can just sleep. Like, he knows that we're here, but, you know, he can just sleep. The only time we went out was to grab, like, well, my ex grabbed a cup of coffee, we grabbed a snack for breakfast. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks away. And then we went to Safeway and tracked down some puppy pads, because we didn't know if he would be able to pee or poop since he couldn't get up. About halfway through the day, Dougal suddenly made this really concerted effort to try and get up, and it was kind of heartbreaking because his legs were not working, but you could tell he couldn't even sit up, honestly. I mean, he was the only thing he could do at this point was kind of lie. But halfway through the day, he started making this really concerted effort to try and get up, and my ex and I were like, well, let's just try and help him. You know, I mean, if the worst comes to the worst, his legs will buckle and he'll just fall. I mean, it's you know, it's not the end of the world. And the way that we helped him stand was the blanket that we put under him. We actually kind of log rolled him from his side onto, you know, all fours, and then he managed somehow to kind of jerkily push himself up. And then he collapsed down again, and we were like, okay, you know, this isn't going to happen. Let's just get some puppy pads under him. If he's going to void or if he's going to have a BM, it's just going to have to be on the puppy pads. That's fine. My ex was like, I need the loo. He ran into the toilet. And as soon as my ex did that, Dougal suddenly lurched forward and stood up and kind of zombie jerk walked out onto the balcony. And I was just like, oh my God, like, okay, let's do this. I followed him out and he kind of circled around a bunch of times, and then he just had the biggest bout of diarrhea I have ever seen him have in the 5 years that he has been alive, that he was alive. It was insane. It was just like, I just, you know, I was standing there thinking, okay, is it gonna end? Is it gonna end? And he just kept on going. It was like, wow, it was a lot. It was a lot. And I think, I guess one thing that I have not mentioned yet about Dougal was that while this whole thing was going on, his diet changed very dramatically. He's always had a very healthy diet. As soon as he started becoming unwell, his tastes changed quite dramatically. Anything that was kind of like wet food related, he could not stand. It was like he would get very, very nauseous around it. I mean, you would put it under his nose and he would turn around and run away. So the only thing he could tolerate was like very dry stuff, like milk bones. And then for some reason, randomly about halfway through the month, he suddenly decided that he would tolerate wet food, but he only really wanted like junk food, like he didn't want his regular tinned food. And so we started buying him just anything just to get him to eat. I mean, because he had lost so much weight with the cancer. I mean, so much weight. He was like skin and bones. If he wants hot dogs, if he wants, he can have whatever he likes, you know. Like, I mean, usually we would be a lot more kind of discerning about the sort of food we would buy for him. But at this point we were like, he can have anything. You know, if he wants like cheap ass hot dogs, he can have them. So he was getting stuff that he'd never had before. And there were days when he would completely smell it and look like he was going to throw up. And then there were other days where he would just wolf it down. And the day before he died, he had eaten 2 things of tinned chicken, like 2 little cans of like tinned chicken. And I think it just upset his stomach, honestly. I mean, he's not used to that kind of food. So yeah, he had this massive raging bout of diarrhea, and I'm so happy that he had that because it would have been so uncomfortable for him to try and hold that. So that happened, and then he turned around and he like zombie walked quickly back into the apartment and he collapsed back down on the blanket again. And that was the last time that he went outside, ever. It was a really beautiful last day. I think the weather was just really pretty. It was a sunny day, it was blue sky, and springtime, you know, it was the end of April. The birds were all singing, you know, just chirping away in the trees in the courtyard. And we had the door to the courtyard, the door to the balcony in the courtyard open, and Dougal could hear the birds, and I think that he liked that. I don't know, who can say, but I think I'm happy that we were able to have the door open and he could hear nature and he could hear, you know, just the sounds of outside. You know, he grew up in this neighborhood that we live in. I mean, the whole time that we've had him, he, you know, he has like lived in this neighborhood, so, you know, all of the sounds, like, you know, the trains and the streetcar and, you know, the cars and the like crazy drunk homeless people, and, you know, there's like a group of people who sit outside opposite and play music on their boombox all the time, and I don't know, just all these like little sounds, you know, that's what he's like grown up with. And it was kind of comforting, you know, on his last day to just have the door wide open for him to be able to sort of hear those just very rhythmic kind of background sounds of like life just going on, you know. So yeah, he pooped and then he came back in and he laid back down, and then, you know, he just continued to like breathe heavily. We would kind of flip him over every couple hours. He was just lying on the carpet on a blanket, and I was worried that it would be uncomfortable, so we would kind of flip him over like a pancake every like 4 hours or something, just to make sure he wasn't uncomfortable. And then around about 4 p.m. we gave him a sedative that the vet had prescribed, and this was just to kind of mellow him out a little bit, because he did have a history of aggression issues, and we didn't know how he would react to having a strange vet coming into the apartment and sticking him with a bunch of needles. So yeah, we gave him a sedative at 4, because we had anticipated the vet showing up at, well, between 5 and 7, right? So at 5 p.m. the sedative had really still not kicked in. I mean, he was kind of, what's kind of bad, I mean, it's good and it's bad, is that around about 5 p.m. he actually kind of started to perk up. And this is exactly what my ex had feared. He was like, you know, he's just really terrible all day long. He can't stand. He's like on death's door. And then, you know, just like I had described earlier, you know, where he has these peaks and troughs of sort of like he's good and then he's bad and he's good and he's bad. Like towards the end of the day, he was kind of starting to just perk up a little bit. I mean, he still couldn't stand, but he was really perking up, and it was like, oh God, you know, you've been lying here all day, kind of comatose, and then the second that the vet's going to come to euthanize you, you're going to decide to like perk up. And it was like our worst nightmare. It never actually happened that way, but he definitely, you know, he tried to sit up a couple times. You know, he was just kind of looking around a little, then he would lie down again. And I honestly think, when I think back on it, I think he actually needed to pee again, and I think he was trying to get up to go pee, but he just didn't have the strength. So again, we had a ton of puppy pads underneath him, but he was such a good boy and he was such a smart boy, and he never went in the house. And so I just think that, I just don't think he would have peed inside. I just don't think that was in his nature, but you know. So around about 6 p.m. we get a call from the vet saying that she's on the way. And then that's when things really started to happen. So, you know, we really started sort of saying goodbye to him. He, around about 6, he actually started getting very sleepy. Like the sedative was supposed to kick in an hour, it actually took 2 hours to kick in. So around about 6 p.m. he did actually start getting very sleepy. And the vet arrived, and my ex went out into the courtyard to kind of talk with her about what was going to happen. And then I stayed with Dougal upstairs on the landing. And just, you know, like I had been doing all day, I was just laid down next to him. I was like right in front of his face, just like petting him. And the vet came in, and she came up the stairs very quietly, as we'd agreed. She had a blanket over one arm just in case Dougal, you know, realized there was someone there and turned to try and like nip her. And, you know, she was whispering to us about what she was going to be doing, and Dougal didn't even bat an eyelid. I don't know whether it was very unusual, because usually he's very territorial and he doesn't like people in the apartment, but I think the combination of him being sick, him being tired, and him being sedated just meant that he was just, I don't know, it's weird. He wasn't super out of it, but he just didn't seem to mind the fact that she was there, and that gave me a lot of comfort, because it would have been so traumatic to have her put him down and him be like fighting it or something. So she came in and she explained what she was going to do. She said, I'm going to give him an injection, and it's going to be just basically a muscle relaxant. And she gave him the injection, and she went back downstairs again, and she said it's going to take maybe 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to work. And it's kind of funny, it clearly was not working. Like he was still kind of like trying to lift his head up every now and then, and I was like, I don't think it's working. And she said, that's okay, I'll give him a little bit more. So she crept up the stairs again, and she gave him a second muscle relaxer. Now, I don't know whether it was a full dose or whether it was just like a little top up, I'm not really sure. But as soon as she gave him that second muscle relaxant, he just like kind of went limp. And it was really unexpected. I mean, you know, I don't know what I thought was going to happen. I mean, you know, obviously if you give someone a muscle relaxant, they're going to go limp. That's the whole point of a muscle relaxant. But it was very dramatic. And then she said, you know, so he's relaxed now. He's not in any pain. Basically, at this point, you just let me know when you want me to go ahead and administer the final injection. And so Max and I just sat there with him for, you know, a minute or two. I really, at this point, wanted to get it kind of over with. You know, we'd been with him all day, and my ex had been with him for even longer on the balcony since that morning. And I, you know, as horrible as it sounds, I just wanted it to be done, you know. And so she said, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And she gave him the injection. And I don't know, I knew that it was going to happen very quickly, but I was shocked at how quickly it actually happened. So she the way that it works if you ever have to get a pet euthanized is they will administer the muscle relaxant, and then they will administer the actual injection that stops the heart. So she gave the injection. She said, I've given the injection, I'm going to listen to his heart. And she put the stethoscope there, and she said, his heart is very faint. And then I'm not even kidding, like about 3 seconds later, she said, and his heart has stopped. And that was that. And I just, you know, I just lay there with him, and I just kept petting him, and, you know, telling him how much I loved him. You know, he was looking right at me when he died, and my ex was kneeling right above him. I was like laying down, you know, with his face right here. And it was very hard, but it was very quick. It was very quick, and you know, to anyone who is, sorry, I'm crying. To anyone who is thinking about getting this done, I would say absolutely do it. I mean, pet euthanasia is so, it's so painless. You know, I could tell he was in absolutely no pain. It was very, very peaceful. It was very, very peaceful, and given that the alternative was him dying a very, very traumatic, painful, scared death, I'm very, very happy that we opted for it. But in the moment when it's happening, it just doesn't always feel that way. So we both lay there with him just for a couple of minutes. She gave us some privacy. She said, take as long as you need, but I knew it was her last call of the day, and she'd been doing this all morning since 8 a.m. You know, I mean, God, what kind of a job is that? She was extremely lovely, extremely compassionate, you know, just wonderful. So we signed the paperwork and we paid the money, and then she said, I'm going to go get a stretcher. So she went and got a stretcher, and she brought it back, and we helped her get him on the stretcher. It was very easy. I thought, God, 92 pounds is going to be a, you know, pain in the ass, but I guess as soon as he passed away and everything kind of relaxed, he was actually a lot lighter to kind of lift, which is weird. He had gone when he passed away, which I had completely expected. It's very common. Whenever your muscles relax, obviously everything relaxes, and so he had peed and he had pooped when he had passed away, so I kind of helped to get him cleaned up. The thing that I remember the most, and this, I don't know why it makes me sad, it's weird, but she kind of moved most of his body onto the stretcher, and then she said if you could just cradle his head and help move his head. And when I went to cradle his head, a bunch of water kind of came out, like a liquid came out of his mouth and went all over my hand. And it wasn't gross, you know, again, I've said this a million times, but I work in healthcare, bodily fluids do not faze me, but it was just very, like, you know, he had been drinking water like crazy all day because he had been on this steroid, and he was panting a lot, and the cancer obviously made him pant too because of all the ammonia. And so, you know, that just kind of, as soon as everything relaxed, that kind of came out. But the thing that really got to me was, and I don't know if this says, I think to anyone else this would be gross, but I felt like I didn't want to wash my hand afterwards, because, you know, it sounds weird, like your dog just threw up all over you, you know, when he died. But it was like him, you know. It's very hard to explain. But anyway, so yeah, she got him on the stretcher. He had a blanket that was underneath him, and then that went over him, and she had his head still showing, so we could still see his face. And we carried him down the stairs. Right before she got here, but before the vet got to the apartment, it had started raining, which was very strange because, like I mentioned, it had been so sunny all day. And then just typical Portland, Oregon weather, you know, it just started raining, but it was very beautiful. Like the rain came down and it smelled really fresh. And I kind of like the fact that it started raining. I'm glad that Dougal got to smell the rain one last time before he passed away. The other reason I was really happy about the rain, and again, harking back to what I was talking about earlier with the balcony, but we, you know, well, my ex and I, you know, we live on a street that has a lot of apartment complexes, and there's always people hanging out in the courtyard. There's a lot of dog owners. They always hang out, you know, they've got their chairs out and they're hanging out with their pets, and the pets are running around, and there's kids running around in the apartment complex and everything. And I just really wanted some dignity for Dougal, and I think in an apartment complex that can be hard to find. I didn't want his body carried out and, you know, 50 people staring at him. It's not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just wanted more dignity for him. And the really nice thing was, you know, right before the vet arrived to put him down, it started raining, and so everyone went inside. And we did not encounter a soul when we got him, you know, down the stairs to our apartment complex and out through the gate and into the street to load him into the vet's car. I don't know, it sounds weird, but I'm really happy about that. So we loaded him into the car and covered up his head, and we both kissed him goodbye, and then that was that. She told us that we would be able to pick up his ashes in about 2 weeks. We said goodbye to him, and that was that. And then my ex and I both basically just spent the next week crying non-stop. Yeah, we hung out with each other almost every day, just talking and crying and reminiscing. I think Dougal's death has definitely hit my ex harder than me, and that's saying something. And I don't want to speak on behalf of him, it's not my place, but you know, what I will say is my ex was working from home and Dougal was around him a lot, you know. And they had all these little routines like you do when you have a dog at home, and it's been very hard for my ex to be in that apartment with Dougal not there, and you know, everything that you do, you're kind of expecting him to come running or to be underneath you, and he's not there. And I know it's been extremely hard for him. A couple of days ago, we got the call that his ashes were ready to be picked up, and we went to pick them up. That was also very surreal. We couldn't go into the crematorium, we had to wait in the car, and the ashes were brought to us like it was like a takeaway or something. It's very weird. But we were very happy to have his ashes back. He was cremated, excuse me, he was cremated through a process called aquamation, which is like a more eco-friendly form of cremation. That's the service that the pet euthanasia company that we went through offered. So that's what we went with. So we got his ashes back a couple of days ago. I ordered a special pet necklace, which I'm wearing right now, and you can actually put your dog's ashes inside the necklace, and so I'm going to be doing that in the next week. I haven't gotten around to doing that yet, honestly. I just need to psych myself up for that, but I did get a necklace with his name engraved, and sorry, I'll be able to carry his ashes with me, you know, everywhere I go, which I don't know, maybe to some people sounds very cheesy or weird, but to me it brings me like a lot of comfort. And yeah, it's very, very, very hard without him here. You know, I know I've never sort of shown Dougal on my channel. I mean, granted, I only have like 7 videos, but you know, I haven't really ever talked about my private life or my pets or anything like that, but he was a huge, huge part of my life. I did almost everything with him. You know, I'm very shy, I'm very introverted. I think I get along better with animals than people sometimes, and Dougal did everything with me. I mean, everywhere I went hiking, he went. Everywhere that I went trail running, he went. When we would go mountain biking, he would go. You know, I took him to the beach every time I went to the beach. Anywhere I went in Portland that I could take him, I took him. I mean, he was just such a part of my life. My ex and I, really, I think the only reason we remained friends was because of our dog, and our dog was just a fantastic kind of conduit for us kind of staying in touch and remaining really good friends. You know, I saw Dougal pretty much every day. And he was 5 years old, you know. I think the injustice that I feel just really stems from the fact that he should have had another 5 years at least, maybe another 7, maybe another 8, you know, if there was a just God. He would have had more time, you know, and I think that's the thing that my ex and I have struggled with more than anything, is just he was so young, and it just seems so unfair. So yeah, that was my April, and that's why I really haven't put out any videos. You know, I was on this kind of health kick before April. I was eating well and trying to exercise, and well, actually I had taken Dougal all throughout the month of March with me on like a million hikes and everything, and walks and whatnot, and then this hit, and between this happening and my car getting stolen by junkie crackheads, April has been probably one of the worst months of my life. So I apologize for not really being around. I have a ton of videos planned coming up in May. I'm very excited about them. I definitely want to move onward and upward, but you know, April and the beginning of May has really just been time for being still and grieving and just taking everything in. So yeah. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate your time. I know this video was very long. To anyone else out there who's in the process of going through this, my heart goes out to you. It really does. You know, just stay strong, and no matter what happens, you know, just be there for your pet. That's all you can do. And I'm so grateful that my ex and I had the time with Dougal that we had. He was the perfect dog. He was smart, loyal, amazing, fun, just the most amazing dog. I mean, really, you know, everyone says their pet is the most amazing dog, but Dougal really was the most amazing dog, and I'm so grateful for the time that I got to spend with him. So I'm going to stop this video before I cry again, but thanks for watching, and I will see you again soon.